by the time you reach age 63, I, by the way, have the exact same birthday as Oprah Winfrey, you realize that there are a lot of paths to success and a lot of things one could talk about that contribute to success. But if I had to pick one thing, it would be this: the power of yes. What I have for you now are 10 suggested actions, all centered around this theme of yes, that you can take to help you achieve success in your endeavors. So here's the first: write it down. That means you have to figure out what it is you want to achieve. For that reason, writing it down is not an easy task. But if you are serious about achieving your goals, you have to know what those goals are, so write it down. Then, when you write it down, see yourself in your mind's eye as already having achieved those goals. I first did this write it down exercise in my mid-20s. I wrote in a notebook my financial goals, where I wanted to live, what kind of job I wanted to have, and I included lots of details. I did wonder how some of these things were going to happen. But ultimately, I found this: focus on the end result you want, and don't worry too much about how you're going to get there. Life will surprise you. I found this notebook about 15 years later when I was going through some old papers I had stashed away. And here's what I found. Virtually every goal I had listed, I had met. Now, while all of that was very satisfying on one level, in my mid-40s, I went through some major rethinking of my life and goals. This time, I wrote down what I wanted to achieve in the way of personal, more internally directed goals: how I wanted my body to look and feel, what I wanted my attitudes to be, how I wanted to be better able to deal with setbacks, stress, fear, etc. In short, how to live a happier life. Not too long ago, I came across this list, and reading it felt a little surreal because as I looked through each item on that list, I thought, wow, that's more or less true for me now. So, whatever it is you want for you, please take that first step and write it down. This next step in my mind is the linchpin of it all, and that is say yes to opportunities. If you are steeped in your vision, what you have written down, something interesting starts to happen. Opportunities will start coming your way. Now, I'm not sure why this happens. Is it some sort of cosmic magic? Or is it that your brain, bombarded by huge amounts of information, now knows how to filter that incoming deluge and can spot opportunities that it wouldn't have seen otherwise? Sometimes these opportunities will come from an unexpected direction. That's certainly been the case in my life. The best advice I can offer on this point is to trust yourself. You will know when to say yes. And sometimes these opportunities are big jumps. Don't let that stop you. You've already seen yourself in your mind's eye in these roles. So just say yes and tell yourself you will figure it out as you go along. Many times throughout my life thus far, I've thought to myself with a sense of wonder, how did I get here? Oftentimes, I just jumped in when I spotted an opportunity. Here are a few eclectic examples. In 1974, I enlisted in the United States Air Force as an integrated avionics component specialist at a time when such fields had just been opened to women. Starting in 1999, I traveled a total of 16 times to a special place in South Africa where I would lie outside under the dark, dark skies of the Karoo and gaze at a blanket of stars that stretched from horizon to horizon. In 1992, I walked into the Clinton-Gore campaign headquarters in Little Rock, Arkansas, with only a piece of paper with a woman's name on it in my hand. I had never worked in a campaign, much less a presidential campaign. I wasn't sure exactly what I was supposed to do, but I knew I would figure it out as I went along. This figuring it out leads me to 3. Go the extra mile. Find ways to learn what you need to know to do your job well, but don't stop there. Always do more than is expected. If you just do your job as prescribed and nothing more, how will you stand out in any way? Wherever you work, ask yourself, what would I do if I were in charge? This will give you a broad perspective and motivation to learn the details of the business that you're in, who's in charge, and what's going on in the industry. You'll also start coming up with ideas as to how to make improvements. You'll be mentally ready to step up to a higher position when the opportunity does present itself because you've already been there in your mind. This next tip is something I found useful. As I look back, I see that while I got help from others, no one ever opened doors for me. Instead, I had to actively seek out and ask for opportunities. I grew up as the middle child in a family of 8 children. If I wanted something, I had to get it myself. If I wanted to be noticed, I had to speak out. So here's number 4, sit in front. This simple practice will force you to be engaged, to pay attention. Resolve to be a player. If you have nothing to say or nothing to ask at a meeting or seminar, why are you there? It really helps if you can train yourself to not be overly concerned with what other people think of you. That doesn't mean that you should ignore constructive criticism. Such feedback can be valuable at times. Try to evaluate it dispassionately. Is the person giving you this advice someone you admire and respect? Does what they say make sense to you? Think about it. If you are President of the United States, something like half the people in the country will not like you. The higher up you go and the more visible you are, the more criticism you will attract. If you have ambitions for yourself and want to sleep well at night, you need to get comfortable with that fact. You also need to take action. That leads me to 5. Strike while the iron is hot. Don't postpone or procrastinate. If an opportunity comes your way, say yes. I found this to be true. Some opportunities don't come around again. This next one I'll call a rule. It is really important. On its own, it won't lead to success, but you simply cannot have true success in life without it. 6, be kind to yourself and others. It used to bother me a lot that I would criticize other people in my mind. It took me a while to figure out that critical voice in my head was being even more harsh on me. It wasn't until I started to heal some old pains from my early childhood that I found, with almost no effort, that the internal criticisms I had toward myself and others just sort of melted away. It turns out that all my years of previous resolutions to think nice thoughts of others had made little headway because I hadn't drilled down to what was causing those troublesome thoughts in the first place. Understand this. You are not your brain. You can't even control your brain. Your unconscious mind is making decisions all on its own, and you think that you have done this. Well, you might then ask, how can I make changes? How can I do anything in my life if my unconscious mind is making all the decisions for me? That brings me to 7. Develop good habits. Let's face it, good habits make for an efficient, effective life. If your unconscious mind is not thwarting you on this, and I'll have more to say on that in a moment, you can consciously decide to create a habit. Let's take a relatively simple example. I have developed a habit of exercising. On certain days of the week, I do a particular set of exercises. I no longer think about it. If it's Tuesday, I do my Tuesday exercises. During all of 2016, I was the primary caregiver for my husband, so I needed to be home most of the time. I couldn't just take off and do what I'd been doing before, so I had to create a new exercise regime for myself. This regime of day-of-the-week exercises is now a habit for me, which I find that I like, so I'm keeping to it for now. But what if I find that I'm not doing the conscious work needed to create a desired habit? That brings me to 8. Find out what's holding you back. If I find myself making excuses, that indicates to me that there's some part of my brain that doesn't want to do it. And maybe there's a good reason for this. Sometimes there's a valid concern that's percolating in my mind and hasn't yet made it to my conscious awareness. In any event, I don't berate myself. Instead, I get curious and try to figure out what's going on. This is actually kind of fun, trying to figure out how the brain works. I say the brain to remind myself that it's not personal. It's just the brain doing its thing. I've also found that changing your perspective can help. That leads me to 9, reframe. What is the story you tell yourself about your life, about the things that happen to you? Whatever happens, don't allow a painful episode to turn into a story of failure and defeat for you. Keep reframing the story in your mind until you come up with a story of strength, healing, and resilience that rings true for you. In 1984, I married a man, an extraordinary man, who was 28 years older than I was. So I knew going in that I would outlive him and that someday I would face losing him. I feel lucky that we had so many truly, truly wonderful years together and that he stayed healthy and vibrant for so long. But in the end, he was ready to go. He died in late January of this year. I'm resilient. That's the story I tell myself. So I know that I will get accustomed to life without him. Nevertheless, I'm still going through the normal grieving process. So I did wonder just a little why I so readily agreed to give this talk so soon after my husband died. But upon reflection, I realized that the habits that I've developed over the years are now ingrained in me. Almost without any conscious thought, my brain followed rule number 2, just say yes. It also followed rule number 5, strike while the iron is hot, because this opportunity may not come again. This is my opportunity to give what I hope is an inspirational talk on issues I've thought so much about, and I'm grateful that I was asked to do it. And finally, there is 10. Life is short. Maybe. We are born, and at some point we all die. I've come to a perspective where I realize that I or anyone that I'm close to could die at any time. I accept that and even feel some peace with it. At this stage of my life, I treat life as a game, and the rule of the game is to make the most of whatever time it is I have remaining. Lately, I've been intrigued by some fascinating research that suggests a possibility that this could be a very long time indeed. There are some of us who think that we are on the cusp of being able to dramatically increase the human lifespan. I'm talking about living to something like 200 years. Just thinking about this possibility is mind-blowing. My plan is to try to stay around long enough so that I can take advantage of all the new anti-aging technologies if and when they become available. There's no question for me. I'm saying yes. Will you?